Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into another fun episode of We Can Fight Like Cats If We Have to. You have the rambunctious Natasha. You have the nuclear Allon. And I am the explosive Saly. And there may be a special guest appearance on this episode every so often. It is mating season on the farm, and we do have a peacock, and he is in the mood. And so you might hear what appears to be a cat noise. It is actually a peacock. Just in case I didn't seem weird enough, yes, we do have a peacock. His name is Alex, and he will make an appearance likely on the episode tonight. So how are you guys doing tonight?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
You, Nat, how are you doing?
Not bad.
So we're getting together today to wish everybody a, somber Canada Day. I'm not going to wish everybody a happy Canada Day. It's a somber Canada Day. It's time to grieve. It's time to recognize. It's a time to reconcile. It's a time to really evaluate what it means to be Canadian and what is happening in this world around us. Because I think it is our responsibility as citizens, as permanent residents, as immigrants, as naturals, as Indigenous people, whatever we are, we have a responsibility to look at our identity as a nation and see how we can move things forward from this point. And I don't mean move things forward by burying everything that's happening or happened, but we're not going to pretend that it happened because it's still happening today. We need to actually establish this nonsense that's happening around us. And we need to identify that this is more than just a trend. The Indigenous culture is more than just the flavor of the month. The Black culture is more than just a flavor of the month. And you know what? We're not going to go and sit there and watch people take one culture at a time and make us a trophy hat for the month for fun. This isn't an opportunity to give yourself a sticker if you think that you're a great Canadian who, is doing a great job by moving forward, because we really haven't moved forward if we don't acknowledge the problem. And I like to compare this to marriage. If there are rocky times in the marriage, the only way to make it work is to communicate with each other and to possibly get a marriage counselor, kind of like a neutral person in the middle. And right now as a country, we need marriage counseling because our relationship sucks. I think that's like a universal agreement, right? What do you guys think?
I'll let Natasha go first. Ladies first. So.
Thank you. No, I don't have much to say. I think I agree that you need a neutral mediator, and I think that's the problem with all these commissions that they've had, all these endless commissions, is if you have the government itself appointed or somebody they've selected, and that person is doing the mediating or that person is doing the the process, then it's not going to be as thorough and as critical as it needs to be. And I think you do need to have an outside person, completely somebody who's maybe not even Canadian, maybe somebody from an agency. So I think because this is really serious stuff, and it's not like we didn't know. I think there are people who chose to ignore the stories of the residential school survivors when they came out, and obviously was not one of them. So this was not a shock to me, but I was getting irritated with the shock and awe that people were expressing. Oh my God, we knew this. There were, thousands of kids that were lost and presumed run away and all these other things. But, we knew that they didn't turn up with their families. So good possibility that they had died. So not surprised at all. And I think it's way past the time. It was way past the time for these kind of gestures that they keep doing. So I think we need a very, very serious sort of intervention at this point. And I think it needs to be an outside, maybe country. Really.
Allon, what do you think?
I think that I think Natasha's correct. I think that any sort of judgment on this does need a third party, i.e., the UN. I dare. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the atrocities here are probably on par with Hitler in Germany, honestly, and Rwanda. I remember when the Rwanda crisis happened and Canada was talking all their shit. How dare they? You know, they're evil, they're mean, they're violent, blah blah blah. And yeah, that was a tragedy, but at the same time, you know, we're finding hundreds of bodies.
It'll be thousands.
Yeah, and it's gonna end up being close to tens of thousands at the end of the day, right? And you know, I mean that equates to genocide. There's no question about that, and it equates to, you know, a Hitler Holocaust style of doing this. You went ahead and you know, told people one thing, you lured them into or stole them or whatever you had to do to get them to another location, and then you chose to eradicate them. That is straight up what Hitler did. There is no prettier way to put this. And these are definitely crimes against humanity. I believe that, you know, the government of Canada and the country needs to be held accountable on a world stage. For many reasons. I mean, I think the biggest reason, one, is because of the actual act, but also for propagating lies for generations of Canada being this neutral, happy place, this safety, you know, escape for slaves in the Underground Railroad, and, you know, and all this jazz, when, you know, behind closed doors, at the same time this propaganda was being spewed up into 1997. So clearly deep into the 20th century, you were still going into Indigenous communities and feeding them lies or stealing children and just and literally killing them. There is, I mean, this is insanity. I am, you know, as I've, you know, I don't even know what else to really say about it besides the fact of just I am angered as an American, and as a permanent resident here. I'm angered for the reason that I just stated. I mean, you know, look, the U.S. has done its dirt. There's no question about it. But this is a different type of evil, right? Like, I mean, you know, we had the slave trade in the States, and yeah, the States did some pretty fucked up shit and still is, you know, not where it needs to be by a long shot. The problem that I have with Canada is that Canada went ahead and wanted to consistently, as part of its marketing campaign to the world, point the finger at the United States as if they were somehow better, that they were more civilized, that they had their shit together. And I think it's really, really ironic and really, you know, disturbing, the fact that in all of Canadian promotion and promo, as far as tourism goes, you see them infusing Indigenous cultures in their marketing materials. So you mean to tell me that, you know, that you're kidnapping these children and killing them and killing Indigenous people, trying to wipe out the whole race, but yet and still you want to steal their culture and infuse into your marketing campaigns consistently. To this day, you cannot find a Canadian piece of marketing promo that does not show an Indigenous person either singing or dancing or in some sort of garb to count as the culture of Canada. It's despicable what's happened here. You know, my deepest condolences to the Indigenous communities as a whole. You know, and it's funny, my wife and I were talking about this, and, you know, we had some pretty intense, just emotional conversation about it, not in a combative way, but just kind of venting about it to each other. You know, it's really, really just despicable how a country as a whole is going to go ahead and choose to wipe out an entire race of people systematically. And you know, we had, you know, in New Brunswick wants to go ahead and be like, oh, well, we didn't have residential schools. No, you didn't, technically by name. However, New Brunswick was the poster child and the prototype for what will become the residential schools. So over here, they wanted to go ahead and go to Indigenous communities and say, okay, Indigenous community person, we're going to go ahead and like take your children and put them in a school and teach them a trade. And they'll learn English and they'll learn the trade and they'll be better off and blah, blah, blah. So New Brunswick was the pilot project for what happened in in Ontario and other Western provinces. So New Brunswickers need to understand that our hands are far from clean. Our past is far from laudable. We definitely had a hand in this. And you know what? I am going to go out and say something extremely controversial right now, but it's a podcast, so fuck it. Any person, and I'm aiming this at white-skinned Acadian individuals who swear by the fucking Catholic Church. If you still are going to swear by this fucking terrorist organization, then fuck you.
Thank you.
Because there is no excuse at this stage of the game for you to still hold an undying loyalty to an organization, a worldwide corrupt organization that has proven time and time again through pedophilia, through murder and genocide, through crime, consistently throughout the ages. The Catholic Church has shown time and time again that it is ruthless, it is brutal, it is violent. And if you were going to go ahead and talk this fucking Mother Mary rosary shit, fuck you. Especially here in a country where Indigenous people are the makeup of this land. And you as Acadians want to talk about when the issue was brought up, oh no, we side with them. Oh, we're friends with them. You want to intermarry with them. You want to go ahead and play these games, but yet and still when it comes to this tragedy, which is exactly what it is, you want to go ahead and now try to pick sides? There's no side to fucking pick here. So that's what I'm going to say. And I will take the smoke and the heat for that. I speak for myself and not for others on this podcast. But honestly, like, religion is a fucking tool of just mayhem and destruction. And the Catholic Church, I'm sorry, like, you know what? Again, this shit has to stop. Like, this is just unbelievably just diabolical for you to go ahead under the guides and lie to people. And then, you know, you look at it in modern times now. So the thing that blows my mind, the more I talk about it, the more it just gets me. It's like, so you have a government in place and, you know, prime ministers, you know, much like presidents, are given reports of what's going on, right? So there is no way that there was a prime minister ever that did not have reports come across their desk about what was going on. And in these residential schools, there's no way, right? You are the leader of the country. You get these reports. You get
what
these
is happening
briefings.
in our foster system. What is happening on our reserves. This still happens.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's the time of the residential schools, but he gets reports on this stuff. Sorry to cut you off, Allon.
No, you're listen, you're right. And I appreciate that. Like, that is what it is. So for, you know, as much as I am not, you know, a fuck Trudeau guy, you know, in this one, I just may be, because if you know what's going on and you are aware of the history of Canada, and you are aware of what's going on in these Indigenous communities, and all you can do is offer a fucking verbal apology and talk about, you know, the time for reconciliation with all minority groups, I feel, has passed. Right? Like, that's the equivalent of, you know, your young child consistently saying, I'm sorry. Like, at some point in time, the I'm sorry needs to turn into an action of change, right? Because the I'm sorry becomes a ploy to get out of punishment, right? So it's like, you know, with white males when it comes to issues of, you know, systemic rape. Well, you know what? I'm trying. We're trying. There's always that gray area and get out of free card to continue the bullshit. And that to me is what reconciliation is. It's not you changing a damn thing.
Yeah.
It's you saying, well, you know, I'll stand here and say, you know, an apologetic phrase, and, you know, we'll come up with a cute sound bite, and this, you know, we'll put on some t-shirts, and this will be the hashtag for the next little bit, and we can say, you know what, Canada reconciled. No, that's not, we're past that. We're past that. Canada's blatant attempt to wipe out Indigenous people is just horrific and extremely wrong. And, you know, I really hope that, you know, again, the UN is not perfect by no means, but they are the global tribunal. And I do hope that much like I believe they had ruled against Canada in the fishery incident, where they said that
I don't know, it wasn't loud enough. No,
right. But
made.
Right, but
Right.
my point is that at least they're looking, they're watching, and I'm hoping that they're looking at this, and that there will be, and that there are things going on behind the scenes. I hope that they will decide to go ahead and and call Canada out on a world stage for the atrocities that have happened and are happening here with the Indigenous communities. And again, this whole bullshit that people are going on about, oh, people want to cancel Canada Day. Yeah, we do. Like, I'm not going to play this game of, oh, we're not trying to cancel Canada Day. Yeah, we are. Right? Like, that's exactly what it is. Right? There's no you can't celebrate a country, much like the States and much like other countries. So I'm not just shitting on Canada, but Canada's a topic right now. You can't celebrate a country with such a violent past like this, especially with everyone knowing now what the past is. You can't act like you don't know what's going on. You can't act like you haven't heard about this. You can't act like that you can't claim ignorance anymore. So for you to continue to want to proceed with letting off fireworks and and getting drunk on boats doesn't exist, that's pretty fucked up. And you know what? This is a time for Canadians of all genders and races to really, really learn about the history of their country that they want to talk their shit about, and understand that real change needs to happen, and happen now. That there is not equality here in this country. That there is clearly a colonial, systemic, racist body at work on a regular daily basis. Yes, even in the 21st century, in the year 2021. So yeah, I'm just going to stop there because I'm just going to go off and keep saying shit.
Well, I'm going to call off the numbers, right? So when, excuse me, when Columbus first landed on the southeast shores, so North America, there were estimated 100 million Indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
So by June 25th, 1876, the cavalry was released into the general population to assassinate them. We went from 100 million Indigenous people to 250,000.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know math, let me do this for you. All right. So 100 million divided by 250,000. I didn't do that right. 250,000 divided by 100 million is the number that we need.
Yeah.
All right. 2.5% were left to survive. Then you go into the current population of Indigenous people of Canada is 1.67 million people self-identify as Indigenous. Those aren't the ones that have the cards. Those are the ones that self-identify, which means that some of them actually have historically in their history been forced somehow to sell out their identity, basically choose between either their family or survival or money and their identity. And so now you have 1.67 million of 37.5 million people. So 37.5 million people. Okay. And we take 1.67 million. So let's do some math again here, shall we? Sorry for all of our listeners listening to some lame math doing, but I think this is important to really understand what we've done. And I don't mean us by our own hands, but our complacency by just letting this be okay and acceptable and letting it go. So right now,
it's 1.7 divided by 37.
4.4% of Canadians are the original Canadians. 4.4% of Canadians are the original owners of this land. The rest have been eradicated, executed, forced into hiding, had their children stolen from them and killed so that their offspring could not survive and their genes would die on with those children.
And then there's the sterilization as well.
And there's so exactly, women going to give birth and smelling their uterus on fire when they get a C-section, and they don't know what the hell is going on. And then they're told they were sterilized unconsensually, which, by the way, for many of our listeners, please know that that has not ended yet.
No, it's still
That to this day happens. We are not talking necessarily about drug addicted,
no.
Heroin shooting up mothers who keep having children. We are talking about Indigenous mothers like Chantel Moore, who was executed for no reason other than maybe we can use the argument that she was depressed. This is what we are doing in our country. And right now we're talking about the Indigenous flavor of the month, because it is a flavor of the month. Let's be realistic. And dear Indigenous listeners, this is not an attack on you. This is actually a point blank statement of how fed up we are by being used as trophies to collect sticker points. Survivors have been speaking about this for decades.
Yeah. And
I can relate to many of these stories. I remember when the bodies were first found, hearing the interview of an Indigenous man speaking about how in the Catholic residential school, the teachers or the nuns or the priests were taught to hit the head because it doesn't leave a mark. And as I was driving my car, I had to pull over because, as previously mentioned before in previous episodes, I was a victim of the Catholic Church. I am not Indigenous, but I am both a visible minority and a religious minority. And I had to pull over because I never understood why the strikes I received on my head were constantly on my head until the moment that I heard that elder say that this was a taught tactic because it didn't leave marks. And those words are true. Like, why is it that when a white woman says "me too," there's automatic credibility to her word, but when an Indigenous person says "me too," and let me be very frank and take this to a whole other level. If we want to talk about sexual assault versus physical assault, and if we even want to talk about pedophilia assault versus sexual assault versus physical assault, unfortunately, I have had all three experiences. And I can tell you that what keeps me up at night is actually the physical violence, not the other items, because I have grown past the other items. But the physical violence is what makes you walk down the hallway afraid of being touched from behind, afraid of being grabbed, uncomfortable when you're in a grocery store hearing someone walk behind you. And I have only spent the last year realizing why I am the way that I am and why I'm as anxious the way that I am. And dear Indigenous people, thank you for opening up so honestly to the general public about your experience, because you are not only connecting to each other and connecting to strangers, but I can honestly say that I had no idea about any of this in terms of the gross detail that it is. And for the first time in my life, I not only feel like I'm not alone, I feel like I'm connected and understood by other people who have experienced this, especially when you hear that common conception of just get over it. And let's go a step further and really let's talk about celebrating with our children. Okay, I want to celebrate with my children. For those who don't understand what generational trauma is, it is not passed down just by genetics. It is passed down when a mentally ill parent is doing the best that they can to raise their child and can't. And for you parents that have this luxury of just, going out on a picnic and celebrating whatever the hell you want to celebrate, and you want to criticize the mom beside you because she's having a bad day because her child is crying about their ice cream, understand that she's likely not crying about damn ice cream, especially if she's Indigenous. She's probably got a lot going on in her brain. And if you can't relate to that, that's fine. But you have no right to put it down. You have no right to act like you're better than these people. Indigenous people that have survived, that have not committed suicide, because the statistic rate of the survivors who commit suicide is actually exceptionally high. I didn't do that research today. I don't have it on me. I would have to go and get it maybe for another episode. If any of our listeners want to comment on our page and tell us, please do. But I know that the statistics of child abuse suicide rate is extremely high. And I'm talking specifically physical abuse, not pedophilia. Extremely high. So the fact that these individuals are still alive and functioning and they keep going and they're still doing the best damn that they can do to contribute to the future, because that's what we do when we exist. We influence each other. We influence our children. We influence each other's children. And that is literally influencing the future. And so for these individuals to just get out of bed in the morning and do that is way more dignified and way more classy than your barbecue. That was my rant. Your turn to rant, Natasha.
Well, I think that I think like you said, you can relate to the children's experiences because the similar sort of tactics were adopted. And I would say, like, even though the residential schools closed, the thinking didn't go away, right? We know the thinking is still there because of the defensiveness and the hostility and the why can't they just get over it? And, all those comments that you see every day on, Facebook or Twitter, you see this all the time. There's people, a good chunk of the population, and they're not all old. Okay, this is another misconception that everybody who thinks this
Most
is
of them are
old
young.
and they're going to die out in like 20 years and, everybody's going to be woke. No. I'm seeing a lot of young men, especially,
And
who have a
women.
lot of anger at Indigenous people because they're taking our money, and at immigrants because they're taking our money and our jobs. And the same arguments are used. I'm sure that were used against Indigenous people, that they were savages. The same tropes are pulled out when it comes to people from other countries. And, it scares me. But at the same time, when these stories come out and all these anxieties I had, like all the time my kids were growing up, when I would see how hostile completely random people were who I didn't even know, and I would be afraid, if there's so many people like this here, how can I trust them with my children? And who do I know who I can trust and who I can't trust? And when this kind of stuff comes out, horrific as it is, and it is, horrific, at the same time, you feel a connection. There's a connection because this has happened before. And until this is dealt with squarely and without lies and without covering up and all that stuff that usually goes on when crimes against, non-white people are committed, this is going to continue. As we know, they're still sterilizing Indigenous women. This is still happening. And I would not be surprised if they're sterilizing Indigenous women. Why wouldn't they sterilize other non-white women?
They do nothing. They don't give us the medical attention necessary while we are in birth, and are statistically between Indigenous and women of color. In my circle, a woman has recently passed away giving birth.
Not just even
2021 this week.
Yeah, not just even
2021.
Wow. No,
This
not just even birth, because at birth you are at your most vulnerable, you and your baby. So that is like literally the worst time. But I would say medical care throughout your life is always going to be inferior. And it's not, I have to say, it's not usually the doctors I've experienced this with. I have experienced this with the gatekeepers of the professions who will not give you an appointment, who will make you ask over and over again, who will, your appointment times will be mistaken or lost. All these things happen frequently and often enough that these are not accidents. And I've had story after story about Indigenous people who have waited in the ER and died. And if this happened, they say it happens to everyone. Okay, I'm not saying it's never happened to other people. It must have in, under-equipped ERs. But if this was happening regularly to white people, there would be, it would be a huge scandal. Whereas when it happens
things would change.
Exactly. When it happens to Indigenous people, it's, oh, well, that ER just was not, didn't have people or whatever. And it's swept under the rug. And or maybe he was drunk, which is the common trope for Indigenous people. And
she was holding a knife. That's why I shot her to death.
Yeah. No, I'm going to be very straight here. I don't believe that for a second. And as far as the suicide rate, which you brought up, which is horrific. Again, the fact that it's happening to Indigenous people, it's Indigenous teenagers who are having these suicide rates. Because of that, it's not an issue. I hear about suicide rates all the time, but I'm not hearing about how bad they are when it comes to Indigenous people. And again, if it was anyone else, it would be a different story. And
a few months ago in Fredericton, it was a white girl. And all of a sudden we had to do mental health reform.
Exactly. And if it had been, I am willing to bet, if it had been an Indigenous person, there would have been no outcry. There would have been nothing. It would have been, oh, well, it would have been the parents' fault or the kids' fault, or their whole family was on drugs or something.
Or just dead silence.
Or just dead silence. And again, the same, because I can completely relate, because I know exactly the same response would happen if you are, from a non-European immigrant background. The exact same response. It's either complete ignore, or it's your fault, or it's your family's fault. And I think there was a study, just to get off, just for a second, there was a huge research, what's it called, project done in New Brunswick about number of children in poverty, and the number of children of minority background in poverty was astronomically large compared to the white population. Again, I hear people saying, oh, that's so sad. Nothing is done. Nothing is done. That's the point.
Something is done. The kids are taken away and given to foster families who really don't care about them and get money for every head that they have.
There were 50 kids who died in foster care just in the last government, the last Liberal government, and they had no answers why they died. And guess what? Most of them were Indigenous kids. So this is, again, it's stunningly obvious. I don't even know how I don't know the kind of mind of a person who can hear all this and deny it. I don't know how I can speak to them. I can't even look at them. And it's a lot of people. It's not one or two bad apples, as they say. There's a lot of people who are deliberately choosing to stay misinformed, deliberately not looking at what's really happening. And comes down to this. I had a problem with this Every Child Matters t-shirt that was going on, and not because every child doesn't matter, which is, it's given, it should go without saying.
Duh statement, yeah.
Exactly, but because it didn't go far enough. I found it inadequate, because what you're, by saying every child matters, you're saying, okay, yes, we know this. What you really should be saying is, until now, every child didn't matter, not the same.
And still don't.
And still don't, until we come out and we acknowledge what we do to people who are not white, and how we treat them, and how we, instead of helping kids who need help, we go after their parents and blame the parents instead of actually seeing, what the situation is, which is, I would say a good chunk of the time actually caused by white people.
And the statute of limitation protects those white people,
Of course it does.
because by the time the person has enough courage to have a voice, the statute of limitation on abuse is 2 years.
No, that needs to be shut down right away.
Years.
That
Not
needs to
sexual abuse, but physical and psychological abuse of a child. Statute of limitation is 2 years. Responsibility falls onto the parent or the child until the age of 18, because at 16, you can go to the police. So it's at 18, when you essentially are still a child, you have to grow the balls yourself to legally try and do something about it. And good luck finding a lawyer who will take your case.
Good luck.
'Cause
Exactly.
most of them have buddies, and because they have buddies, there's conflicts of interest, and you see it in like the adult world, like right now, our business, situations, any business fraud or whatever, you can't get representation because the main organizations that cause the problem are affiliated with most law firms, and none of it is a crime. None of it is a crime if the onus falls onto the victim to prove and recover what they have lost. And so therefore, child abuse, if that child is not a white child,
It's
child abuse is not a crime.
Oh, anything is not a crime. Like anything, I would say killing a child is going to be covered up, and
Not a crime.
Absolutely, it's going to be an accident, or they're going to try to blame the parents, because there was that fire in Halifax where the 7 children of this refugee couple died, and instantly it was the parents. It had to be the parents, and everybody online was saying, these people who come from here and these people, did this to their, I don't know what kind of, sick person would think that a couple is going to kill all 7 of their children.
Yeah.
And even the people who are saying that it was because they don't know how to maintain fire safety standards and all that. And
come from another country. They don't have to worry about heating.
That's true.
But whose fault is that though?
Exactly.
But whose fault is that though? That's the point. Like, whose fault is that? That
immigration
falls on our society and culture. That's it. That's our fault. We failed that family.
We fail everybody. Like
No,
we fail, and I don't mean us individually.
Yeah, that they're
But even we
responsible
as human beings, like even we as human beings, the reason why we throw money at settlement agencies who really don't cut it and don't do their job is because nobody else wants to just be human enough to stand up for other people. And it's really, I think that's the part that really breaks my capacity to comprehend other people, is that I can't understand how you could see someone in front of you with something this is going to come off really wrong, but if someone is in front of you with toilet paper stuck to their shoe, you would tell them. You should tell them. And if you don't, then there is something wrong with you. And if there is somebody coming that comes from another country and doesn't know how things operate, and you choose to either mock them or ignore the fact that they don't know it, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you that you have become so self-centered that you can't look at the bigger picture around you and realize that we're really all part of the same unit? And it really infuriates me, again, the lack of involvement of the United Nations in all of this. But in all honesty, like at this point, I think the United Nations is a bunch of high-paid, glorified positions, to be very frank. Most government, non-government entities are, let's be very frank. But like, I'm really tired of the population allowing these entities to decide how they're going to fix things by putting a Band-Aid on an avalanche. Like, it's just, it's unbelievable. Like, we're talking on another note, on a similar note, we're talking about Emancipation Day. We're talking about Juneteenth. We're talking about all these quote unquote national holidays that, sorry, white people, but you get to enjoy them with your barbecues. Yes, that's great. Wonderful. But what about actually teaching these things in the school system? And I understand that there's a motion to do so now. That's great. that's maybe
I'll wait
a
to see how
week worth of curriculum out of 12
maybe
years of education. So what are we going to change with those other 12 years of education in terms of intellectual analysis of the culture that we live in, of the society that we are a part of the societies we are not a part of the global organization that is this planet? Why can't we expand on this and do more than just give each other a sticker and a holiday, paid or unpaid, to go barbecue? Like, it's I hate to say this, but it's so white. Like, the simple ability to just celebrate on the backs of the losses of other people, just how can you live with that? Like, that is such a colonial mentality. How could you torture so many people and just be okay? Like, how are you not grieving if you are a parent? White, maroon, black, brown, orange, I don't care what you are. How can you think 1,200 little tiny bodies, and especially you mothers, you white women who are mothers, you get
Don't
me.
get me started.
You really get
Don't
me,
get me
because there's this bond that mothers form the second they feel their child move, and the second they feel their body change to nourish and support and grow this child. Love is something biological and spiritual and physical and mental and psychological. Like, it is on so many levels as a mother. So the fact that any mother could just say, screw it, I'm celebrating Canada Day with my kids. I'm getting goosebumps saying this right now. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this right now. I'm barely able to catch my breath thinking about this, because I think of my children and I think of the possibility of sending them to school and not having them come back. I think you can, I can't even talk about it. It is a really real fear for me, because I know what the education system is capable of doing to our children. I've seen it. I've seen the cover up. I've seen the abuse. I've seen the damage. So, dear white mothers can just
I just want to say, while you're getting your breath, kind of white mothers who don't care what happens to other children and how their mothers feel, you're wasting your time talking to them. Because again, it's obviously not all white mothers, but there
gotta
again
be a
is
human
a
in there.
good chunk of white mothers who literally could care less if you were dying and your kids were dying, and they could
I don't want them to care if my kids were dying. I want them to care if their kids were dying.
No,
And I
in their
want them
mind,
to act
we're not
how they hope that other mothers and fathers would act if their children were dying.
No,
That's what I want. Like, there's got to be a human being in there somewhere.
you
Like,
can't
I'm seeing these posts of people saying things like this, and I'm so grateful that none of them are in my personal circle.
No, I've had a lot of them in my personal space, and I've seen them in my kids' schools, and you know, they felt clearly that they had more right to be there than I did. They did everything to make me uncomfortable. I had serious, valid concerns for my children. They did not. And they still made my life hell. So they genuinely do not believe you are an equal human being. They genuinely do not believe your children are equal human beings. You cannot get through to these people. Honestly, I wouldn't even bother. The people who you should be talking to are people who are not like that, because you need allies and you need to wake people up, because people who are not like that, they just assume nobody is. They just assume no one is. So they'll assume that you're being treated like an equal person. If you're being treated badly, it must be your fault. Those are the people you need to be reaching. Don't waste your time with the kind of sick, evil, twisted people who are saying, well, this is not our problem and we need to take care of ourselves. You cannot get through to people like that. It is beyond hope. They are beyond hope. You can't get through to them. Like, I think they're beyond redemption. I think we should move on and not give them a second thought, and just focus on the people you can reach. There are some people who you can't do anything about. You can't change a psychopath. You can't change a sociopath. They will remain who they are. Whatever made them that way, you can't go back. Children can be, but adults are already who they are. I mean, this is really depressing, but I mean, I do think that there's a good number of people who cannot be reached, cannot be made to see that everybody's equal and all people are equal and all mothers are equal and all fathers are equal and all kids are equal. They can't see it. They don't want to see it. They don't believe it. And those are the people who killed these children. Like those were obviously people who did not see them as children. They saw them as a problem.
They do not.
Problem that had to be dealt with.
As children.
They did not see them.
They do not.
No, they didn't.
They still exist. They do not. They fight the system. They fight the system and they win.
Yep, they do.
And this is why you want to celebrate Canada Day? Like,
years ago, I stopped putting the flag up on my house. I stopped. Initially, my kids when they were little, they were so excited and they would put it up. And, you know, initially I thought it was, you know, I kept being told, oh, the reason people are hostile is because you're new and they don't know you. No, that wasn't the reason. That was, you know, utter garbage and lies. And they're never going to change. And this is who they are. And they dominate the society. So at that point, I was like, you know what? No, we're not doing this. I just stopped putting up the flag. I stopped encouraging them. Then they lost interest because they also started realizing, okay, we're second-class citizens over here. What is there to celebrate about being a second-class citizen? Are we supposed to be thrilled about it? No, then you should, if you're going to do that, if you're going to make people second-class citizens, have the decency or have the balls to come out and say, we have second-class citizenship. This is in our law. You should actually have the balls to come out and do it in law. That's what
we are no better than India.
Don't lie to people. Don't lie and get people here who believe they're going to be equal. Stop lying.
Allon, you've got one hell of a look on your face.
I'm just letting you ladies.
We're just ranting over here.
Say what you gotta say. You're not listening. You're not wrong. You know, and again, it just all kind of comes back to exactly what you're saying, that, you know, people who are not minorities and people who are white and white passing, and yes, we want to go ahead and as always acknowledge that, you know, we appreciate our allies. And I personally, that's a huge thing for me to say, because I don't think you should be getting a pat in the back or a fucking brownie point for using logic and common sense. But I will say it, okay? But on the other hand, Natasha and you know, you, Sally, are not wrong in the fact that we have a huge number of people who still do not understand that human beings feel and react the same. There is no difference here. You know, if you love your children, what the fuck makes you think that a person who has a darker pigment than you doesn't love their children? That doesn't make any fucking sense, right? Like, that's just a lack of fucking intelligence and a lack of just logic. People need to understand that we've been programmed on both ends of the spectrum, you know, to think certain things of other people and to make judgments of other people. And you know what, in 2021, that needs to stop. Again, there is no excuse for your willing ignorance anymore. Right? So, you know, yeah, like it's one of those things that people, that is the beginning, I feel. If white people want to know, well, how do I begin and how do I start and where do I, that's where you start and begin. Begin to realize and accept the reality that whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking, whatever you feel towards your family, your husband, your spouse, your kids, your dog, your cat, your job, your neighbors, those emotions run the gamut of races in the world. Right? You are not exclusive to a ball of emotions and emotional content and all those other things that white people have been programmed to believe are strictly theirs and theirs alone. Right? Even the person in a fourth world country loves their children and their pets and their home. Now, whether you agree that their home is of, code standards is not the fucking point. The point is that these emotions, these attitudes are the way humans are built and wired and how we exist. Everything else are fucking mute details that you've been told are differences, and you've been told you need to like, dislike, whatever. But on the base level of it, that is where it begins. Understand that whatever you feel for your child, like Sally and Natasha have just said, Indigenous people, Black people, immigrant people feel for their children as well, right? For you to still think that in 2021 that there's a difference is just fucking insane and extremely aggressive and negative. It is not a misunderstanding anymore. And so, it's that to me is just, I think, the core and the foundation of real change here, is that people just need to stop this fucking bullshit. Like, if you're not Black, then you don't know. Like, let's just stop, right? Like, you don't know. You've been told shit. You've been, that's it. You've been told shit. You've been shown things in movies and TV. That's all you know, right? So the reality is not that. And people really need to understand that, again, on both ends of the spectrum, we've been programmed to believe in and to stand by ideologies that we haven't proven, that we don't know, that are not scientifically correct. And Natasha's right. If you as a human being are not appalled and disturbed by these new revelations coming out about Canada and the way that Canada as a whole has dealt with other human beings, then you have an issue and you should seek help. I think the other big thing that, I know my wife and I were talking about, and Natasha alluded to, and I think Sally did as well, was the fact of, again, the propaganda, how Indigenous people have been saying for forever and telling these stories forever to anyone who would listen. And the government, again, in part of their plan, has done a great job of creating literally a national narrative of who Indigenous people are supposed to be. Right? So, oh no, they're crazy. Oh no, they're drunk. Oh no, they're don't worry about them. They literally have created
Jewish people.
Right. They literally have
camps.
Yeah, they
burn
literally
them down.
Exactly. The same MO that Hitler used in Nazi Germany is exactly what Canada did here. They went ahead and spread propaganda to its people so that the truth can never come out. So once you go ahead and do the dastardly deed, now you got to cover it up. So now since you didn't succeed in wiping everyone out, now you have to discredit them. Just like the white people did in the States with slaves and with Black people, the same thing Canada did here. It's a system. It's a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a process.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And that's what Canada has done. And literally, if you ask anyone who has immigrated to Canada, whether it be from the States or from Europe, they will tell you one of the first things that you learn when you step foot on Canadian soil is that, oh, the Indigenous are given free everything. They're drunks. They're violent. Don't listen to them. They're crazy. They're wild and crazy drunks. That's one of the first things you learn when you get here.
That's what I heard.
That's real talk. I remember bouncing when I was bouncing in a nightclub here, and that was one of the first things they tell you. Oh, well, that big native over there, he just gets drunk and wild and all this other. That's literally what they say. That's one of the first things you learn. And that is the narrative that the government has created nationally. Why? Now we know why. To literally cover up the genocide and the atrocities that they literally were inflicting upon this people for literally generations. And white people, and I know, people are like, oh, you keep saying white people, blah, blah, blah. Look, the fact of the matter is this, is that, what? These are the individuals who constantly want to talk about they don't understand. So if you don't understand, you need to educate yourself. And all we're trying to tell you is that we're all human. And if you really want to understand, then you need to start putting yourself in our shoes, like Sally said. right? If you have children, you need to understand and put yourself in this position of what you would feel like if, right? That's the start, right? Like that's how you connect. That's how you begin to connect the dots and realize what was done was wrong and atrocious and uncalled for. But you're going to continually to sit on your milk crate and talk about, well, no, it's not happening to me, so therefore I don't understand. So it's a voluntary choice if you choose now not to understand, right? Like
I'm going to go one step further.
Go ahead.
Dear white people who think your kids can't handle what has happened.
Yeah, that too.
If those children could handle being slaughtered and executed the way that they were, your child can handle having that conversation in the safety of your home within your arms so that you ensure that no other child feels alone again. My 5-year-old and I have had that conversation. My 5-year-old knows that there were a lot of children that were murdered and taken away from their parents in school. My child knows that mommy has also seen some of the horrific things firsthand. My child knows that, you know, there is police brutality. And yet, yes, if you're lost, you do want to go to a policeman, but not every policeman is a friend. My child knows that there is a big difference between legal system and justice. My child knows that the penitentiary down our street does not house criminals, but houses the people who didn't have enough money or popularity to get away with what they tried to get away with. My child knows that there are people who get away with those things. And if my 5-year-old can handle it and have a conversation and go up to a police officer and have a conversation and go up to other children, younger and older than him, and have that conversation, your child can handle that conversation. And it is your responsibility as a citizen of the world and of a member of the human race to have that conversation with the next generation and have it with them young so that they are not growing up thinking the world is bubblegum and that they are, you know, completely oblivious to the world beyond their white skin. I'm going to bring it to closing points. Who wants to go first?
I think that's a great closing point. I don't think I have anything else to add to that. I think that's key, because that is one of the main excuses that parents use, that, oh, my children are too young, or they don't know how to handle it, or it's too violent or too brutal, and I don't want to scare them. I don't want to give them a negative connotation of the world and whatever. You know what? Minorities have to deal with that consistently and have for generations, of dealing with what the real reality has been for them. And it hasn't been pretty, and it hasn't been perfect, and it hasn't been, you know, like you said, bubblegum and roses. It hasn't. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, we've had to grow up and survive and find a way to do it, and also on top of all that, find a way to become better people, right? To not, you know, stay in those mindsets and those ideologies. It's a hard thing as a minority person, a person of color, to have that generational trauma and to break free of it and to make the conscious effort and take those steps and really break those chains. It's hard. When you're in a world of privilege, you don't have to deal with that. And so, you know what, a difficult conversation is not going to destroy your child. It's not going to jade them to the world. It's going to open their eyes to what the reality is, and begin the road of them understanding what empathy is supposed to be about, and what respect really truly is. You know, and as a parent, you know what, this may be a great gateway for you to actually get your shit together and to begin to hear yourself say words that you may or may not have said before. Like, oh, like white people did something wrong. That's a big statement to say as a white person, right? So, I mean,
Church is a murderer.
Right. You know, these are statements that a lot of grown-ass adults can't say. So, you know what, this could be a teachable moment for you parents as well. So I think that's a great closing point. And you know, we'll be saying this again on different topics and so on. But yeah, I don't think there's really much more that I can add to that.
Natasha.
Well, again, I think that is the final point, but I'll just add a little to it, that I think that it's important for people especially people who are white, because I think a lot of us minorities already know this, and Indigenous people definitely know this, is how government systems interplay to participate in this destroy people, who are not white, in all kinds of ways, employment, child, whatever happens here on, it may not be murder, but there's a lot of things that traumatize children of color, and those are systematically ignored or minimized, and then those children are gaslighted, so that it's basically mental abuse on a community scale and a systemic scale. And you're basically ending up with children with permanent mental health issues that are not the parents' fault, but your society created. And how I think it's important for, everyone to realize how all these systems interplay to keep that going. You have the school system, you have the public safety system that doesn't follow up on threatening behavior. You have, the gaslighting that happens on a community level, and all these systems. And let's not forget what Child Protective Services has done to Indigenous children, which is, step in when they didn't need to step in, whereas there are, probably thousands of white parents doing drugs whose children are not taken away from them. So it's a complicity on a systemic scale, and it serves to first, you're mentally completely shattered, and your kids are shattered, and then you are discredited. So it's destroy and discredit, exactly what's been done to the Indigenous people. And I think that when people commit crimes, and I think that they have to know that at some point down the road, that is going to come out, because nothing can be covered up forever. Literally, it's almost impossible to cover up things forever. And given that thousands of children died in suspicious circumstances all over the country, there is no way that they could not have anticipated that at some point this would come out. So I think that having committed these crimes, there is a need for them to then completely vilify these communities and vilify these, families. So when it does come out, you get the apathy and the lack of concern and the disdain almost for what these deaths meant. So there's no way this is happening, this person had a bad day, this teacher, and she just hit the kid and they just died. No, this is calculated, planned, strategic, thinking decades down the road to how you're going to make sure when this does come out, because every crime eventually does come out. How are you going to make sure there is no backlash? How are you going to make sure there is no reparations made? And I think that's where it comes down to today, that we have to see where modern Canadians are today, where they are today, and can they overcome this ingrained teaching that has been given to them about what Indigenous people are and how they don't really matter. And are they going to overcome that? And I think that's the question, really. So I just took it in.
That was really well said.
Direction. Yeah, that's true. It's not accidental.
Again, it's not a crime if there's no punishment. I always like to remind people of that. It's not a crime if there is no punishment. To all the grieving parents, to all the grieving children, our hearts are with you. We are shattered. We are shattered. And I'm sorry that we did not listen enough before. I really hope that everyone has a safe Canada Day. I will not shame anyone for having, friends and gatherings. But take this opportunity to have those conversations in your gatherings, because this is a part of what being Canadian is. And if you can celebrate the good, then you have to swallow the bad. And we have to do this. This is the only way we can move forward. If you have anything you want to mention to us, you can contact us on our social media, or you can reach us at our email. We can fight like cats and be, WCFLCNB@gmail.com. Be safe on this Canada Day. Be vocal on this Canada Day. Have those hard discussions today. Be kind to each other. Support one another. And most important of all, because the other two don't matter if you don't stand up for each other. Have a good day, everyone.